Hi, I'm Charlotte DeMolay. If you've been following me on my Instagram account, you've noticed I have been working a lot designing things for Spoonflower, putting up different designs for their challenges and everything. Spoonflower has this interesting feature where you can't put your designs up for sale until you do what's called proofing it. Essentially, you have to order one of the designs. And the most economical way to do this is order a fay or a fill a yard fabric. So you essentially get a yard. You can fill it with up to, I think it's 42 different designs. And you put your different designs on here and then you can proof your work. And after you've proofed it, you can check and make sure things are okay and then put them for sale in your shop. I got my first fill a yard in the mail this week and it was very surprising. I've never designed for fabric before and it looks very different than on my screen. So I thought I would shoot this video and let you see the differences, some of the differences I found, mistakes that I've made, and then things that were just unexpected. They weren't necessarily mistakes, it's just working in a different, essentially a different medium for myself, working with having the prints on the fabric instead of on a canvas or on a Z-clay or something like that, which I have done before in the past. So let's walk through this together. One of the biggest things I learned was watercolor does not translate very well. Let me move to a watercolor design. For example, these birthday gifts. This was a neat design. You can see what the image looks like on my computer screen and my iPad versus on the fabric. It looks good. It's just some of the texture is not as pronounced. And this is one of those times where proofing lets you catch mistakes. So this is the pattern that I designed to coordinate with it. As you can see, let me straighten this out. As you can see, these are two different colors. This is kind of an off-white beige and this is white. And I checked my files and the background was the same. So I couldn't figure out what was going on. They're both the same file type. They're both saved as PNG. And so I wasn't quite sure what happened. Why did one print as a white and one print as a beige? So I downloaded the original files from Spoonflower and discovered that on this when I uploaded it, somehow my PNG file that I uploaded didn't have the background color in it. It was white. And this allowed me to catch that. The color is so slight. It's more pronounced here side by side on this, but the color is so slight on the computer screen that I didn't catch that this was different. So again, that was a good mistake to catch. That's my mistake. I don't have these listed for sale in my shop until I can fix it. I need to upload a revision of this, or I may just go ahead and remove the background in here. I kind of like the contrast better. That's something I realized as I printed these out. I need more contrast in some of my designs. Another interesting thing I discovered about watercolor, and these two pieces were, I designed these to be a coordinating fabric with my Luna collection. I love the elements in this. I did this in Procreate, kind of a watercolor effect. This I think turned out great, and another coordinating piece to go with it turned out pretty good. And the other pieces, like these stars, a little bit of a watercolor background, you can see that. Watercolor moons, those are okay. These are just the little sprigs that were in it. This came out okay. These two did not. These were supposed to be not solid, but watercolor fabrics to coordinate with this, to pick up the purples and the greens that I used. And, you know, if a quilter or someone creating a bag or something like that would have coordinating fabrics. You can just barely see the watercolor spots on the purple. You cannot see it on the screen at all. It looks like a solid piece of green. I mean, which could be good. It's the same green, but it does not have the effect that I intended. As you can see on the screen, what it looked like to me versus what it printed. So I kind of need to go back to the drawing board with this and heighten the contrast, do something to get this more pronounced, or make the decision just to have it a solid color. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do on this one yet, but this was something I never would have known till I printed it out and got the proof. Now this is on their petal cotton. Of course, things are going to look different depending on the fabric you get, but you know, this is one of the more popular fabrics, so I would hate to disappoint somebody that sees something on the screen and then it's not there. Here's another one. Take a look at my little mini shells versus on the screen. There's a lot more contrast on the screen. These little white flecks in the background almost don't show up here. There's so much kind of white in the threading of the cotton that you just lose that. So I either need to do something, make the blue a little darker, do something in here to kind of hype that up, because that is not at all how I thought it was going to look. Now that is what I found with the watercolor. On the positive side, the pieces that I did in Affinity Designer, which were vector-based instead of the raster of the watercolor pieces, I love how these turned out. They're crisp. Of course, vector-based images, that tends to be, one of their one of the things that make vector-based, they are a little bit crisper. You can resize them, and there's a lot of different benefits. I'm not going to go into that. But these designs by nature had no shading, no texture, and they just printed so much more beautifully. This was for a Tuscan wallpaper challenge, and this was the piece that I entered. You can see I printed it on 2 squares because I wanted to see the full thing. I love this. I love how the lines look. There's some good contrast in here and in the background, and these are some of the coordinating pieces to go with it. I think these turned out really well. It is interesting that these lines are not black. This is actually a really deep brown. Anywhere you see that it looks like it's black, it's a deep brown. So colors, all colors print a fair bit different than you think they're going to on fabric versus, like I said, paper. I don't often print out my designs on paper to take a look at it, just because printer effects and things, it's not going to be accurate, and definitely not with the fabric. So that was interesting. This was another vector-based design. This has a lot more intricate detail than the other one. There's these little pink dots in the back of this, and these show up a lot more pronounced than the background flecks and stuff on the watercolor. The crisp edges of these wildflowers. I think this turned out really nice. One little experiment I ran was this one here. If you kind of look between the 2 lines, it doesn't look like there's a big difference, but with this one there's a feature on Designer where you can add noise essentially to a color, and it kind of gives this grainy effect. Looked really cool on screen, and I almost submitted that design, but I was not sure how it would print on fabric. So at the last minute, I went back to crisp, no noise, but I wanted to see how it would print. I was curious to see how it ended up printing out on fabric, and I'm glad I didn't do it. It's subtle, but this looks grainy. It looks like I used a low resolution file in here. So be careful of any sort of textural noise effects you use, because they may not just translate very well to the fabric. And again, here's another very slight coordinating piece, but the crisper edges, the contrast, it shows up against the background, unlike the watercolor. I'm very pleased with this one. This is one of the last designs I did for the challenges, and different color blues. It was a Pantone Ultra Steady challenge where they gave a set palette of blues, and you can use various tints with them, but those are the only colors you could use. You could not introduce any other color, including white or black. So these were the blues that were designated, and some of the tints with it, and I love how this turned out. The lines are crisp. Even when the colors are very similar, it's still very crisp against it. So I'm finding, even though I love texture and watercolor in my paintings and some of my other designs, I think for fabric, this is much more appealing to me. And this is one I need to check out as well. I haven't checked it out in Affinity yet, but you can see the background color of these two is slightly different. And I'm not sure if I did that. I'm sure it's something on my end, but I need to see why. Did I do that intentionally or not? But it's something to be careful and check with. And when I first started uploading some of the files, I was doing it in JPEG, and then I changed to PNG. Shouldn't make a difference. And I did check my colorways with Spoonflower. Spoonflower prints in RGB. My files are saved in RGB, so that's not the issue. I think probably it's just a slight bit of carelessness. Now this, I think I actually did want more of a coral tone with these and yellow with these, but it makes them where they're not quite coordinating. They, if somebody wanted a bit of each of these, it looks a little bit off. And seeing that printed out, it helps you visualize that more than seeing it on your screen or flipping through images. And yes, I know these don't line up. They're not supposed to. These patterns don't quite match. That's the other thing that this helps you check is the repeat pattern to make sure there's no edges and things in there. And to do that, you've got to print small enough. Now, I do check that on my computer screen because I have a massive monitor. I can zoom in, and I mean pixel by pixel. I can make sure things line up. So my proofs aren't necessarily for checking my repeat patterns. For me, this was all about the color, especially the watercolor. Looking to see how these watercolors printed out, the effect of that. The effect in here, watercolor washes in the spots. So that's what I learned with my first Spoonflower Fill a Yard, my first proofing. I didn't talk about this one. This I did for a challenge, and I did kind of an under the sea theme. Kind of looked to me, it reminded me of seaweed, and I put these little patterns in here from octopus, little bubbles and dots in the background. Again, this is very busy, but it's crisp. These lines are crisp. It shows the contrast a lot better. I'm just a lot more pleased with how this printed than something like this, where it's low contrast. Certainly in some designs, low contrast is intentional, but not always. Sometimes you want that contrast, and this was a good learning exercise for me. I'm going to go in and tweak some of these. Some of these I've already put for sale in my shop. This was a good learning experience for me. I'm glad that Spoonflower actually does this. I'm glad this is a requirement. I've been a practicing artist for nearly 30 years. I have printed on all kinds of substrates and painted canvas, paper, note cards, all kinds of things, wood. But this is the first time any of my artwork has gone to fabric, and especially the computer image to fabric. These were all designed on the computer. Some of the watercolor, I did a little bit of hand painting and scanned it in. The wildflowers were some I hand painted and scanned in and then vectorized. But all these designs were created on the computer. So you're looking at your monitor, I'm looking at my iPad, looking at the color pathways on that, seeing how the designs are. And it's very, very different when it gets printed on fabric. This was a good learning curve. Again, I'm grateful that Spoonflower does this. It was a good thing for me to learn. And since I had never created designs specifically with this type of thing in mind, mine are more pictorial, figurative, it's a painting rather than a design. This was a good learning experience to see what is more appealing in a design concept, again, to be used for fabric projects, home decor projects, wallpaper, that type of thing. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Try a few designs, see what you think about Spoonflower. Thank you.